My name is Erin Wing. I spent 2 years working in the shadows as an undercover investigator for Animal Outlook. I'm now stepping into the light to share my story about my last investigation. A story about how dismal and barbaric the dairy industry truly is. On Dick Van Dam Dairy, a large dairy factory farm in California, I experienced and documented the industry's cruel life cycle. Calves being born just to be discarded or become milking machines themselves. Cows being regularly impregnated so their bodies produce the milk people drink, and being violently abused throughout their lives until they are considered spent and slaughtered for cheap beef. All this cruelty, and for what? This is a dying industry, desperate to stay afloat while it drowns everyone else in the process. It's time to let dairy die. It's time for me to share with you the truth of how dairy is made, all caught on my hidden camera. The dairy industry is fueled by death, which is evident in the countless lifeless bodies of calves I saw on the farm. It's shocking. The dairy industry has manipulated advertising to American families so much that many of us still believe that milk is a harmless product, but that couldn't be any further from the truth. In dairy, male calves simply aren't profitable. I remember a worker pulling a dead calf from inside one of the cows. His fate was sealed before he took his first breath. The calves who did survive, the females sent to grow until they could then be impregnated and milked, may live longer, but their lives will be full of agony. Scared and injured cows are crowded into what the industry calls the milking parlor and hooked up to automatic, mechanized milking machines. I still remember standing in the parlor, sick to my stomach, while I watched workers and a manager brutally strike cows with wooden canes and a metal rod, night after night. On a night I'll never forget, cows were being hit so violently there were loud cracks that rang through the parlor like thunder. The first time I heard it, I jumped. I was scared for the cows and scared for myself. People might say that this doesn't happen on all farms, that one farm can't represent the entire business. Yet I have seen workers use violence as a tool in every factory farm I've been to. The milking aisle was so crowded that cows were forced to trample each other. This cow crawled helplessly through a thick layer of feces on the ground, while a worker sprayed her with a fire hose. Workers stood on her back, attached a metal clamp on her hips, and dragged her against the rough concrete. Confused and in pain, she was then lifted off the ground with a tractor, dangling about 20 feet in the air. I held my breath, wondering what would happen if at least one chain came loose, picturing her body crashing into the cement below. This cruel use of the hip clamp was a common way to move sick or injured cows, referred to in the industry as downer cows. After enduring constant violence and injuries, the cows who collapsed from overexertion or abuse were dragged by tractors through dirt and feces, violently kicked, and forced to endure fingers being jammed into their eyes while helpless on the ground. It was common to see cows suffering from injuries or other ailments, making it difficult or painful for them to walk. I remember bracing my shoulder under limping cows' hindquarters to help them walk in the milking parlor, because I knew that if they didn't move, they would be beaten by other workers. Many cows suffered from a very painful infection of the breast tissue. Though workers were supposed to check for infection before milking, many didn't. The infection caused milk to be stringy and thick, which workers would refer to as cheese. I also often saw milk tinged pink with blood. In the 2 months I worked there, I never saw a veterinarian on site. Cows who were suffering so severely were denied veterinary care, and instead of being euthanized to at least end their misery, they were left to languish for days without access to food or water, finally dying from starvation, dehydration, or succumbing to their ailments. There was one night I found 2 dead calves lying in the dirt there. I remember how the cows gathered around the dead bodies. They started mooing, and I knew then that they were mourning the lives of those dead calves. When I went back to speak to the manager to notify him about the dead bodies, he seemed wholly unconcerned. But after that, I remember how bad my hands were shaking. I looked up at the stars as I stood outside trying to catch my breath. And I remember feeling completely alone. The journey of a dairy cow is one of never-ending misery. If they managed to survive the torment of the factory farm, they would be forced and electrically prodded onto trucks bound for slaughter. Before leaving the field, I was able to rescue 2 calves from this factory farm, Samuel and Hank, and bring them to Animal Place Sanctuary to live out the rest of their lives there. Unfortunately, the negative effects of dairy life sadly took its toll on Hank, and he died shortly after the rescue. Sam, however, is now happy and healthy at the sanctuary, a rare exception to the rules of the cruel dairy industry. I carry a small figurine with me to remember Hank by. He was only able to experience a short part of a better life, but Sam will continue to thrive in his memory. Although I'm leaving the field with a heavy heart, I know that I, just like you, can still make a difference in these animals' lives by continuing to keep dairy out of my kitchen and off my plate. If my story resonates with you, please share this video so more people will know my experience and finally learn the truth about dairy. And please consider donating to keep our cameras rolling as we continue to expose cruelty on factory farms.